Right, his story is mainly consistent. There's just,
Would you tell the jury what his story was to you about what happened that night?
he, can I just start that day?
Yes, in the bottom of page 44.
Right. He went to work that morning at Intel. He smoked Scooby snacks or spice on the way to work, at lunch, all the time. He mentioned an increased stress level at work due to a big project at work with a new processor coming out. And he says the Scooby snacks would mellow him out. And that he relied on that daily to take care of his anxious thoughts. He left work at 4 p.m. that day, went home, and worked on his computer for 2 more hours prior to picking up his 5 children. During these 2 hours, he reported he used more spice. The youngest 2 children, that would be Elaine and Gabriel, were being taken care of at the neighbor's house by Miss Elke. He picked up the 3 oldest children around 6:15 from Saxcoth Elementary School at an after-school program. While in the car, he mentioned that he downloaded this song called Expander by Sasha on YouTube because the children had reported that in gym class they had listened to Sandstorm, which is a techno pop song that I think they used to play at USC football games. I don't know if they still do. And they really enjoyed listening to that. Prior to going home, he purchased some dinner takeout from IHOP for the family to eat at home. He said during dinner he tried plugging in his laptop into an outlet near the front door and discovered that the outlet was non-functional or blown. He also said that the light above the stove was out, and he thought something had happened to several of the electrical circuits in the house, or at least one. He said, I knew the kids had done something. Through a series of questions, I ascertained that it was Natan. During question, Natan appeared fidgety, wouldn't look me in the eye, and he clammed up. He said that he could read the nonverbal cues of his children and knew when one of them was lying. He said, because Mira and Eli said that they didn't do it right away, I knew it wasn't the 2 of them. I narrowed it down to Natan. He added that Natan had an unusual interest in electricity. He was afraid that if Natan kept playing with electricity, he would hurt himself. And he gave me an example that Natan had climbed up on the sink in the bathroom and unscrewed the light bulb about 1 or 2 weeks previously. We noted in evidence that that would correlate to an August 16th internet search that he did on child killed by electrical outlet and another search on electrical deaths. Mr. Jones confirmed that he performed this search around the time that Natan had unscrewed the light bulb. So he began what he calls PTing, or physical training. Natan, for the purpose of obtaining a confession, this was one of his ways of discipline. It's a common military term, PTing. He also admitted that he worked him, spanked him, and slapped him on the behind. He said PT involves 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and a couple hundred squats. Not continuous, but in sets of give me 10, give me 20. He did not think this was excessive because he and the children would do sometimes what's called insanity workouts, which I believe is a computer workout like program that's pretty intense.
He gave you different reports of how long the PT lasted, didn't he?
Yes.
I think one time he told you, in one interview, he told you it went on for 1 or 2 hours, correct?
Right. And then another time he said it was just for 20 to 30 minutes. During September interview, he said this went on for 1 or 2 hours. And then during the March interview, one of the March interviews, he said this went on for 20 to 30 minutes.
And he told you as he was PTing Natan, when he was asking him what happened to the outlet, he told you, quote, he wouldn't tell me what he did, he was defiant.
Right, and when he wouldn't tell me, that's when I thought he's plotting against me. But he had not had that thought before that period of time.
PT told you that that's the first time he became afraid of Natan.
That Natan might be trying to use electricity to do something to him so he could go back and live with his mother. So at some point during this, he received a phone call from Amber. Based on phone records, she called at 7:10 p.m. and talked for a minute, 20 seconds after he missed 4 of her previous calls, starting at 7 p.m., which was their normal time that she would call the children every night.
Let me back you up, doctor, because I missed something that I wanted to ask you. Isn't it true that he told you in one of your interviews that he had never thought that any of the children would want to physically harm him prior to that night?
Physically harm, yes.
Right. So
He thought they might want to go back to Mira, but he didn't think they were going to physically harm him prior to that night. Amber. I'm sorry.
And there was a phone call with Amber, actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's his description about that phone call?
He just said he heard Natan tell his mother, "It was an accident, Mommy." And then he reported he became enraged because Natan had told his mother what happened, but wouldn't confess to him.
And you've got enraged in quotes, so that's the word he used.
Yes,
right?
yes.
He was enraged because Natan told his mother he would not confess to him.
Mm-hmm. And then at some point, Miss Jones told him to be easy with Natan.
And how did that make him feel?
I got mad at her and told her to shut the F up, that she was not going to tell me how to raise the kids. And he always felt that she took Natan's side. Later in an interview in March, he said, "I don't like her telling me how to raise the kids when she wasn't around." And that during their marriage, his disciplining of the children was a bone of contention between them.
How does he describe Natan's behavior during the PT process?
Never said anything.
Natan never said a word.
Never said a word. He did take those eyeglasses off the side table and stomped on them.
So during the middle of PTing, when he's not saying anything to his father, he told you that Natan went over to a side table, picked up his dad's glasses, and threw them on the floor and stomped on them.
Yes.
And how did that make him feel?
He added that Natan was, quote, like a hardened criminal during a confession.
What does he tell you happens next?
And that this was very alarming to him because Natan had never done this before. He's reported that I did anything I could to get it out of him.
Those were his words. I did anything I could to get it out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And, quote, the point of spanking is to break their will. At some point, he wasn't getting anything from Natan, so he decided to send Natan to bed early as further punishment.
And then what does he say happened next?
A few minutes later, he went to the bedroom to check on Natan, and he shook Natan by the shoulders and asked him to tell him what happened, and that Natan started losing his balance and collapsed in his arms. He stated, "He just died. He fell to the ground and died. I didn't do anything to cause him to die."
What does he say happens?
That caused me to lose my mind. I knew he had died. I lost my mind. I was aghast. He put Natan on the bed, left the room for a few minutes, returned with some water, hoping that Natan had just passed out. However, he realized he was dead. He stated, "I went into a mad panic. What am I going to do?" He described that intrusive thoughts, what he had described in the past as voices, started when Natan died. And he had not had any of these voices or intrusive thoughts until Natan died. He considered calling 911.
Why didn't he call 911?
He said, they'll think I did it. They're going to say I killed them.
That's his words in quotes, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then what did he say happened next?
He reported telling in Mira and Eli that I think he's dead. Mira said that Natan was not breathing. He sent Mira and Eli to watch television in the living room.
And then at some point you asked him about his discipline of Natan,
I
right?
said, "Do you think you might have been too harsh on Natan?"
And what did he say?
He said, "In retrospect, looking back, maybe I was, but I had no intent to kill or harm Natan."
Then what does he say he does next?
He said he went to smoke a cigarette and try to calm himself down, and then this is where there's a difference. In September, when I first saw him for this evaluation, he said, I tried to smoke spice to calm down.
So in the first interview, Natan's dead. He tries to smoke spice.
Right.
Okay.
And he said, but it wasn't working.
It wasn't working.
I mean, he was still panicked.
That story changed later, though, correct?
Right. In March interviews, he stated that he did not use spice that night, that he had used it 4 to 6 o'clock when he was at home working, but had not used it again until after all the children were dead. So that's just where his use of spice, it really doesn't make that much difference to me. But anyway, so the next thing he did was he performed a YouTube search for American History X rape scene. That was at 8:30.
You asked him about that, right?
Right, because to me that's just weird.
So when you asked him, what was American History X rape scene and why did you search it?
It is a violent male-on-male shower rape scene.
Did he say he searched it or did he say that he watched it?
He had seen this movie previously and he watched the scene and he said he thought, I'm going to go to prison and they're going to do bad things to me. The inmates will think I'm a baby killer.
Those are his words. I'm going to go to prison and they're going to do bad things to me. The inmates will think I'm a baby killer.
Right. And then I asked him if he thought the other inmates would be morally outraged at him, and he said yes.
And you asked that question about him, well, so in his timeline to you, does he watch American History X between Natan's death and the death of the other children, or is it after all the children, or is there different stories?
It's between. No, it's always between.
Okay.
That's never changed.
So Natan is dead. He watches American History rape, and then he strangles or uses a belt on his other 4 children. Is that the story?
Not exactly. He goes out and buys cigarettes at the convenience store.
So is the story always that Natan is dead, he watches American History rape, and then he goes out to buy cigarettes at the convenience store?
Right.
Back.
Right. It kills the other 4.
Then he kills the other 4.
Right. And the amount of time between Natan's death and the other children's death varies between interviews.
But we know from a receipt what time he went to the convenience
It's like 1-something in the morning.
1:50 a.m.
1:50 he went to the convenience store, and he says Mira went with him.
Why was it important for you to ask him about the American History rape scene?
Well, one would not think that this is something that someone would be downloading if they've just killed somebody or killed their kid, and I wanted to know what was he thinking, because what he was thinking reflects his mental state at the time of the offense. And he was thinking, this is what's going to happen to me when I go to prison. And I think that's evidence that he understood the moral wrongfulness of Natan's death.
In fact, you specifically asked him, would the other inmates be morally outraged at him, and he said yes.
Yes.
So that's going to go in as one of many things into whether he understood the legal and moral wrong of his actions that night.
Yes.
So his story to you is that as he's coming home from the convenience store, that's when one of the 2 times he's saying audible voices in his life.
Right.
It's telling him to kill the kids.
Right. In September, he described it as a demonic voice, and then in March, he described it as a, quote, creepy gremlin voice.
All right. In your September 24th, 2018 interview, he tells you what happens when he goes back to the trailer, and what is he thinking?
Went back to the trailer and smoked. He reported that I knew I had schizophrenia. I was psychotic. It was better for me to take their lives. I cut off their windpipes, kissed them, and took their life. I'm not a murderer. I'd rather know where they're at.
All right, let me stop you. So he is telling you, I knew I had schizophrenia and I was psychotic? It was better for me to take their lives. Did he explain to you why he thought it was better for him to take their lives? Not better for the children, but better for him. It was better for me to take their lives. Did he ever explain to you why he said that?
You may be reading more into that than I meant.
Well, you've got
It was better for him as well.
It's a quote from him to you. He said
It was better. I didn't ask him specifically what, but I assumed he meant as a father of the children. In my mind, it was better for me because Amber didn't want them. They would have to go to foster care. They would grow up without not only a mother, but a mom and a father. I didn't want them to go through what I went through as a child.
that was what he explained to you in the many conversations, correct?
Right.
But the quote that you wrote down, and
That's what he said, but
the question was, it says it was better for me to take their lives.
he never said that it was better for him because he was going to be able to get away without the children. I mean, he didn't say that he killed them to prevent them from being witnesses against him.
Did you ever ask him that?
No, I don't think I did.
Then he says, I tried to kill myself with spice and I passed out.
Right.
I woke up the next morning, paranoia kicked in, and he says, what am I going to do now?
And then he thought it was a matter of time before he got arrested. I might as well take a trip to Vegas. I thought about ways to dispose of their bodies. I was scatterbrained. He said he wrapped each child in a blanket and put them in the car. He left August 29th the next day and started driving.
And he tells you he starts ignoring phone calls and texts, right?
Right. He says, if I'm going to go down, I'm going down by myself.
So why did he tell you that he ignored phone calls and texts? Why did you ask him? Why did that come up?
Because I knew that at some point, even in the days after that, people are trying to contact him. I want to know why he didn't answer.
And his answer to that was, if I'm going to go down, I'm going down by myself.
Yes.
I don't want to involve anybody else.
Right. And this is when he downloaded later the next few days that Styx song, Strong Arm of the Law or whatever. I think it's about someone being on the run.
He also told you that he eventually took the battery out of his cell phone, correct?
Right.
So he couldn't be tracked?
Yes.
That's what he told you, right?
Yes. And he was driving aimlessly.
What he said aimlessly is, are you aware that he started driving the next morning, made it all the way to the far side of Birmingham, Alabama, and then came back to Lexington area? Are you aware of that?
Yes.
That would be during the time when he was doing internet.
Or was the next day was the Dunkin' Donuts in Spartanburg day? I thought I may be getting my days confused, but he drove towards past Atlanta one day. I know one day he drove all the way to Folly Beach. He was in Orangeburg. He was in Lake City. He was outside of Camden. He was outside of Spartanburg.
I'm going to hand you State 77, which is a summary of timeline of the phone extraction starting on the 28th and going down. If you look on the 29th, there's internet searches for Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi for drugs, isn't there? That would be on bottom of page 2.
Oh, yeah, August 29th at, now I always got confused, and someone needs to remind me about what UTC -4 means because it has to do with the time.
ignore that part and just go with,
It says 117, and I guess that's AM.
as well as a PM on the next line.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1:17 PM, he searched for herbal incense illegal in Alabama. And he's tried to call at 12:14 that afternoon, he tried to call Zamzam Incense Shop on Peachtree Street in Atlanta.
Well, doctor, let me ask you a question. If he's driving, and I think this time, did he tell you whether he was, during this first time period, did you get specific enough to ask him when he first drove away whether he was on the interstate or back roads?
I know he ended up on back roads because he thought he'd be less visible. I didn't ask. I think I've read somewhere in something that he was on the interstate initially.
But your conversations with him were...
I didn't ask him personally, no.
Would his spice addiction, do you have an opinion on this? With his addiction to spice, if he was driving and made it 3 states over and kept searching and it was illegal, and he needed more spice, would his addiction have him come back to Lexington?
It could. I have no way of knowing what his motive was for coming back, but that.
Did he give you any, you've described his story that night. You've also interviewed him different times. Did the story ever change in any of your other interviews? You have a September 24th and a March 18th and 20th interview.
I'm not sure. I don't remember what you're asking. I'm sorry.
And I apologize for not wording it very well. The September 24th, 2018 interview, that's the first time you talked to him about what happened that night?
Yes, I had never, during the competency eval in 2016, I don't ask anything about what happened.
What you noted from your notes was what I brought out earlier. It was better for me to take their lives. In your discussion, from what he told you on September 28th or September 24th of 2018, I don't see anything in your notes about him saying, I don't want my children to go through what I've been. I don't see that until 2 interviews later.
Yes, that was later, but
So
he told me
didn't
that.
tell you that in that first interview?
Not in the first interview, no.
And he didn't tell you it until the March 18th interview of 2019.
At this point, I just need to glance at my notes because I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yes, sir.
He did say, I thought, what am I going to do with the other kids? This is after Natan's death. Thought comes to my mind, things aren't going well for them. If their mother had been there for them, I wouldn't have done what I did.
This is on September 24th.
Yeah, this is in September. He did tell me that. That's why I wanted to check my notes to make sure.
Amber? If Amber would have been there, this wouldn't have happened?
Yes.
It also, so he said that he consistently, his story was that he choked the 2 older children.
With his hands, yes.
Hands. And he told you, and you made a point of noting this, that Mira struggled. Is that correct?
Mira struggled.
Why was that important?
Because I think it shows determination on his part. And that's a dose of reality. That's sometimes why people might stop and say, what am I doing?
Now, he gave you a time for the time period that it choked Eli to death. How long did he tell you that it took to choke Eli to death? The top of page 49.
He said it only took 45 seconds. But, that's medically unlikely.
Sorry?
Medically unlikely. It would take several minutes to strangle somebody, even a child.
You can lose conscious quickly, but to kill somebody, you have to keep pressure on for an extended time, minutes, correct?
Yes. I mean, if he was using spice, his sense of time would, the place they bought it was called Time Warp. So using synthetic marijuana distorts your sense of how long things are.
Well, and also the truth is we have to take what he says with a grain of salt because he's the only one saying it and it's the only time he says it. True?
He was the only one there. But the reason that I give him the benefit of the doubt is because what he said doesn't make him look very good. He was very detailed oriented with me about what happened with those kids, and it was tough to listen to. But he didn't sugarcoat it. I mean, you could say the voice is sugarcoating it to make him look better. I have no way of knowing if that voice was real or not. I don't think a single voice like that qualifies someone for schizophrenia, and I think the voice, if he did hear it, was likely due to his use of drugs. But he certainly was not giving a version of events that was very kind to him or to his defense.
In the March 18th and the March 20th interviews, you actually had that phone extraction and you asked him some follow-up questions, correct?
Yes.
What questions did you ask him and what were his answers? What were you interested in?
What was he searching and why was he searching for it? I think it's sort of obvious when you look at what he was searching. But, for example, I asked him, why were you searching local dump sites? And he said that was an attempt to hide the corpses. He acknowledged that he had different thoughts about how to dispose of the bodies, such as cutting them or feeding them to hogs or cut them up and put them in a concrete machine, that he was running on fear. He also, at some point, had started searching for extradition laws and where to run if you're in trouble.
He told you that he wanted to know where he could run and hide.
Yeah, where he could run and hide. Those indicate that he knows he's in trouble, and he's certainly aware of the legal wrongfulness.
All right. Let's move on to your opinion as to criminal responsibility, as to insanity, as to whether as a result of mental disease or defect, Tim Jones lacked the capacity to distinguish moral or legal right from moral or legal wrong, or to recognize the act as morally or legally wrong. What's your opinion, Doctor?
I think he was capable of distinguishing moral and legal right from moral and legal wrong, and to recognize his particular acts as morally and legally wrong.
And that opinion doesn't change whether he's schizophrenic. That opinion still stays the same, doesn't it?
That's correct.
If he's schizoaffective disorder with bipolar type, it wouldn't change that opinion.
No, it would not. If I'm wrong about the diagnosis and he has one of those, he still, in my opinion, clearly had the ability to distinguish right from wrong.
One prong of the insanity to start talking about it is a mental disease. That's why we're talking about
Right.
diagnoses, correct?
Right.
But the truth is, we're really looking to see whether he understood legal wrong, moral wrong, or not.
Correct.
So let's talk about some examples of legal and moral right and wrong based on his words and on his actions. That's what we look for, right?
Yes.
He didn't call 911.
Yes.
After Natan, according to his story, Natan accidentally dies.
Yeah, a normal, you're exercising your kid, something happens, let's say the kid has a brain aneurysm or some underlying medical condition and just collapses. The normal thing to do is to call 911. But he was afraid that he would be accused of murder.
Because the quote you have
That what he, I was afraid I was just going to get myself locked up.
So does that show legal or moral right or wrong? Or knowledge of legal or moral?
Legal.
Legal.
Locked up, legal.
Locked up. All right.
Then he misled his actions to other people. He was hiding what had happened.
So let's talk about how he misled other people. The first one you note is Christina Elke. That's the babysitter for the children, right?
Yes.
And he misled her how?
He didn't tell her the children were dead. He told her that they'd be back at her house for babysitting on Tuesday.
Right. At first, he told her, because she asked when the children are coming over, and
She was,
Tuesday.
yeah.
He actually said that.
Right.
And then there was a telephone conversation, and he said he and the kids were
Moving to Mississippi. Or moving out of town.
So his text and statements and conversations with Christina Elke, is that legal or moral, or both?
It's a little bit of both.
Why do you say that?
Because she couldn't call the police and turn them in legally, and that morally she cared for the children and she would be outraged or find it very upsetting that what he had done. Think it was morally wrong.
So you think that his dealings with Christina Elke shows that he was sane?
Yes, or shows that he knew right from wrong.
Show that he knew right from wrong. He also had dealings with his father, Tim Sr., correct?
Yes.
He told his father that either text or talked to him and told him that his plans had changed and he wouldn't be able to come.
Right, so he hid the fact of what he had done from his father.
And is that legal or moral or both again?
I think it's a little both.
Did he ever tell you why he didn't call his father? Why he didn't call him and say, I need you to take the other 4 kids?
No.
He also misled his grandmother, Roberta. Isn't that true?
Yes.
He basically avoided all of her calls and all of her texts.
Yes.
And that again shows legal or moral or both.
Both.
You asked him about internet searches on September 1st of 2014, where he searched for South Carolina dumps and looking at websites related to landfills and camping venues.
Yeah, and he typed in dog search for body in landfill, which indicates he was interested in whether a cadaver dog could find a body if it was placed in the stench of a landfill.
So he's trying to destroy evidence?
Yes. He got bleach to try to remove evidence from his car. Disposal of evidence is, in my opinion, a clear indication that someone knew what they did was wrong, tried to hide it.
Legal or moral?
When it comes to just evidence, I would say legal.
He did an internet search. In fact, I want to say his last search was Missing Children Tim Jones on September 4th. That was his last Google search. What does that say to you, or does it say anything to you about legal or moral?
It just says he wanted to know if he had made the news, if he and his children being missing had been covered by news media.
That would be consistent with his fear of
Getting caught.
mental illness by itself does not equate to insanity, does it?
No, it has to impair your ability to distinguish right from wrong, legally and morally.
Things we're talking about right now.
Yes.
In addition to the searches for camping and landfills and dog searches for bodies in landfills and missing children, Tim Jones, he also looked about extradition laws and where to run.
You face a U.S. legal problem, where should you run?
What does that tell you?
He knew he was in trouble, or gonna be, if he didn't get away out of the country where he could. And in his card, there were notes, scribblings about what to do with the bodies, and at one point, it had the initials MB. It was at the end. It said MB. And I said, in my initial interviews of him, I said, what did that mean? MB. I was thinking Myrtle Beach. I don't know. Well, there it is up at the top right.
State 79. So
Lexington camping, Mexican border, because the thought was to go camping and dispose of the bodies.
Then we follow the line and we're over here to LV, Las Vegas.
Yes. But anyway, MB, he didn't know what that meant when I first saw him in the fall of 2018 interviews. He couldn't remember. And then he spontaneously told me, without my asking, during the March interviews, he says, oh, by the way, that means Mexican border. I remember, he'd remembered in between my interviews that meant Mexican border. And once again, that's a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? I think I've been here too long. It doesn't make him look good. Why would he volunteer that to me if he was trying to make himself look good? That's why I'm sort of reluctant to diagnose malingering.
You noted in your report that there was a passport in the car as well.
Correct. Which also shows some ability to organize, play in what am I going to do as to what he put into the cars. Things that meant a lot to him, his diploma, I believe, his Freemason materials, things that had sentimental value, he was able to rationally think about what to take with them.
In addition to his plan of travel that he laid out for you, there's also some other things on here. Day 1, burn up bodies. Day 2, sand down bones. Day 3, MB. Smiley face, dissolve and discard. Do you know whether that MB is Mexican border?
It's my understanding MB meant Mexican border, period.
All right. So the fact that he has a plan to burn up bodies, sand down bones, and go to the Mexican border, dissolve and discard, does that so legal, moral, or both?
Legal.
Legal.
Get out of the country. Take the evidence with me.
Up at the top, head to campground, melt bodies, sand bones to dust or small pieces. Something, I think, sanitation plant. I'll let everybody read it to what they get out of it. The fact that
That's discard by sanitation plant is how I read that.
Thank you, doctor. That also then would be legal.
Yes.
When we move down here below, though, it says loose ends. You see that?
Yes. What he needed to do before he got out of town.
And it's got names. Do you know who those people are?
Christine would be Christine Elke, I think.
Sure.
Jim Mick is, I believe, his boss at the time at Intel. SG, I think, is Saks Gotha Elementary. The pediatrician, Amber. I don't know that top one. I can't read that from here.
And Amber, Grandma, and
At
Dad.
the very top.
Oh, up there.
Is that Terry? I don't know what that is.
So loose ends, things that he has to deal with.
Before he leaves, and then bills he needs to pay.
So does that have any bearing on legal or moral, right or wrong? Or does that just show organized behavior?
It, to me, just shows that he was planning and thinking what he needed to do.
Same with middle column bills.
Yes.
Okay. How about over here on the far right? Tattoos, glasses. I'm not sure whether you ever discussed that other word with him, the third word.
I don't recall discussing this specifically with him. The glasses I know refer to, though, his damaged glasses that he said Natan stomped on.
Could it have been for disguises?
I think it's hunting gears at the bottom.
Could it have been for disguises, way to avoid? Or do you think that's just taking care of loose ends?
I didn't ask, and I don't want to venture there because I think I'd be speculating, and I don't want to do that.
Okay. He also went to Walmart, and you questioned him about that?
Yes.
Walmart purchase, correct?
Right. He was buying stuff to try and dismember, destroy the bodies.
That would be the jab saws, the goggles, the dust mask, the 5-gallon bucket, and the muriatic acid.
Yes.
So the fact that he went to Walmart, pulled those items off the shelf, and bought them for the purpose of dismembering and destroying his children's bodies, all 5 of them, legal or moral, or both?
Legal.
And then there's actually, you're aware there's physical evidence that that Natan has marks that are consistent with.
He tried with the saw on Natan's leg, but couldn't bring himself to do it.
And that would go to legal.
Yes.
Taking the battery out of the phone, is that legal and moral both? He didn't want to involve his family. He didn't want to involve anybody else because he wanted to go down by himself.
All right. I think it's, yes.
And also he didn't want to be tracked by.
And there was a cousin or something that had texted him offering assistance,
Yes.
and he didn't respond to that cousin.
Because he didn't want to drag anybody else into his problems.
I didn't ask him specifically, why didn't you? But
You also have down in here, which you on page 50, number 6. He stated to Lexington County investigators in Mississippi, quote, "The voices in my head told me nobody will ever believe that you didn't murder him. Now you need to kill the rest of the children and get out of town." That statement by itself, if taken for true, legal or moral or both?
legal. And that's a very atypical. That's what I'm saying. I think these are his anxious thoughts. These are not auditory hallucinations, because psychotic auditory hallucinations do not give 3-step commands.
Well, would you agree with me that his statement, "Nobody will ever believe that you didn't murder him," that's talking about Natan, that can be moral? No one. Society.
Okay, well, I think you're getting to hair splitting, but it could. I think the moral wrongfulness, to me, comes from the protecting family members, comes from downloading that rape scene, realizing that the other inmates would find what he did morally wrong. And as I was preparing for my testimony, I re-listened to his confessions or his statements to police, and in the back of the police car after the bodies are found, he says, he cries out, "God, forgive me." And asking God for forgiveness to me is really direct evidence that he realized the moral wrongfulness. And then he made another statement that I don't deserve or to go to the children's burials. That also to me indicates that he really realized the moral wrongfulness of what he'd done.
And you heard that on the
Out of his own mouth, yes.
on September 9th when he's riding back with law enforcement after he's shown them where the bodies are.
Right.
He also, your point 7, a lot of lies to law enforcement about the children, right?
And one other thing I forgot to say. He also says on that tape that he feels ashamed of what he's done.
On the 9th tape of September.
Yeah, at 44 minutes and 50 seconds, he says he feels ashamed of what he's done. And feeling the sense of shame indicates knowledge of moral wrongfulness.
He lied to police. When he first got stopped, he was asked why the car smelled so bad, and he said garbage. That wouldn't be true. It was from decomposition.
And he said he didn't have any children. Then at some point he had 3 children, and they're back in Colombia with their mother or a baby, someone.
And then the next day he told another group of law enforcement, I think when his father was there, I put them out of the car at Walmart.
And he admitted to making that up, that the kids never said they wanted to feed him to the dogs.
All of those would be legal wrongfulness, right?
Yes.
He then is confronted by the FBI agent and Detective Creech with the Sheriff's Department about the purpose of the saws, and he says that they were for tree limbs. So he gives not the truth about why he was trying to destroy evidence.
Correct.
That would be
Legal wrongfulness.
And then we've already talked about the American history rape scene, which you said is moral wrongfulness.
Yes.
To all 5 children.
Yes. I mean, if you know it's morally wrong to kill one,
At that moment.
and you don't have delusions that would impair moral wrongfulness about the other 4.
So those are all of your justification from either his actions or his words to say that he is not insane.
Correct. That's not all of them. I mean, but it's a good representation of the majority of them, yes.
The more we look through, probably the more we can find.
You can always find other things that suggest that.
All right. So that's criminal responsibility. Right?
Yes.
You were also asked to look at capacity to conform.
Yes.
Which is also known as guilty but mentally ill, right?
Yes.
Explain to the jury what that is and what your findings are on that.
In order to find someone guilty but mentally ill, the court or the jury trier of fact has to find that the person lacked the ability, sufficient ability, to conform their conduct to the requirements of the law. In other words, he couldn't resist doing what he did. He was compelled by his mental illness, but in his...
Can you give an example of what that is? You know it's wrong, but you can't stop yourself?
Yes, let's say that, let me give you the earlier example about the neighbor who you think is trying to kill you by poisoning you through your air conditioning vents. You could kill that neighbor. You could call the police and say, look, my neighbor's trying to kill me. The police come, they investigate. They go, no, we find no evidence of that. And then you call them again. About the 3rd time you call them, they say, we think you need a mental evaluation. They're going to have you checked out. You get checked out, put in the hospital, come out. You still think the neighbor's doing it. You think to yourself, if I call the police, they think I'm crazy. So you kill the neighbor. But then you dispose of the body. You hide what you did. You wore gloves. You lied to the police. I don't know what happened to the neighbor. You clearly understood it was wrong to kill the neighbor, but you were maybe compelled by your delusion that if I don't kill him, he's going to get me at some point.
So your opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as an expert in the field of forensic psychiatry, is that he did have the capacity to conform.
Yes, he reflected and thought about what he did and made a decision to do it. It was not something impulsive. I mean, he says Natan was an accident, but I don't think that he has a mental illness that prevented him from realizing that he was potentially disciplining Natan too harshly. This fits a pattern of excessive discipline that had been reported by ministers, former pastor, babysitters, and the DSS investigations.
So when he says that he doesn't want the children to suffer, talking about the other four, he doesn't want the children to suffer like him over the loss of his mother, why is that not a delusion that gets him a guilty but mentally ill?
Because delusions don't start suddenly, and that's just him morally justifying what he did. There's a difference between being morally justified and knowing and not knowing moral wrongfulness.
And again, we're going off of his story.
By his statement, yes.
So he's telling you, in your opinion, that he feels inside himself morally justified for doing it.
Because Amber didn't want them.
But at the end of the day, he made a choice, didn't he?
Yes. For the four.
And your 3,500 competency, criminal responsibility, capacity to conform, you don't always find people not insane and guilty but mentally ill, do you?
You mean not guilty but mentally?
Not guilty but mentally ill.
No, I mean, I've opined quite the opposite. I had a not too long case ago where a woman killed her two young children, school-age children, elementary school in Greenville. And I opined that she was not guilty by reason of insanity and didn't appreciate or recognize the legal and moral wrongfulness of what she'd done. And there have been other murder cases of adults where I've opined the person lacked the ability to distinguish legal and moral right from legal and moral wrong.
You looked at all the evidence you could get to you, didn't you?
I did the best that I could, yes. I looked at a lot of evidence. There was like, for example, I would get a video of him parking his car at the Dunkin' Donuts by the dumpster, and I couldn't get it to play. But I was told by, I think your office provided that video of what it shows. I didn't think it was crucial that I see that piece, but other than that, I think I've tried to review everything that was given to me.
Thank you, Dr. Frierson.
Just to briefly, you talked about the competency evaluation that you did back in 2016. Do you recall whether or not the defense cooperated with you in that competency evaluation?
Hey, Mr. Jones,
Yeah.
are you?
Me.
Yes.
Did I?
Yes.
Did I say that we think he's not competent? Or
No, you were saying that was not your issue.
we had no concerns about
Right. You said you didn't want this evaluation. You had no doubt that he was competent. But
it? So it's not an issue raised by the
correct.
He talked about his anxious thoughts, and you had reviewed his statements to law enforcement after he had recovered. We met with Detective Creech, right?
Yes.
And in those statements, the voices that he's talking about refer to him. He refers to them as saying, "You're F Tim," right? They use his name, talking about himself in the third person, right?
Thinking about himself in the third person.
Right, and that's unusual, isn't it? Usually you just think, what am I going to do? Not like, what am I going to do, Boyd? Or what am I going to do, Dr. Frierson?
The fact that it uses the word Tim rather than me,
Yep.
that's a point that is well taken.
Tim has always been cooperative with you.
He's been very cooperative.
He's always been engaged with you.
Yes.
People, when we talked about people faking stuff, people can also fake being better than they actually are.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
What do you mean by better? Better in what way?
Well, they can mask symptoms. They can try and hide symptoms.
They can try and hide symptoms, yes. They can be experiencing symptoms and they can deny them.
Right. You talked about Tim's mom. You know, she's still alive, right?
Yes.
Did you ever talk to her?
No.
Did you ever review a video of her statement?
I don't recall seeing her on video. I recall reading through mounds of records of her hospitalizations. I mean, I know she's married to another man with schizophrenia. I knew that she had a baby and didn't realize she was even pregnant. She's very mentally ill. That is, to me, that's not even an issue.
You talked about the glasses being stomped and smashed. If the glasses are still intact or still around, would that be a hallucination? Would that be a delusion? What would that be if they were still in existence?
Well, it could be a lie. I don't think that would be, that's not something that people would be, delusions don't start suddenly like that, like I said.
It could be a hallucination.
But there was some also, he had called around this time, the glass, where he got the glasses.
For like a couple seconds.
Yeah, but the number, you dial the number, which would make sense about wanting to get glasses replaced or whatever. And somewhere up on one of those sheets, handwritten pages, it says glasses.
Right. On the handwritten notes, it said glasses. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
It said glasses, right?
Right.
The part about the American History X scene and the prison rape scene. Now, you work in Department of Corrections.
Yes.
And prisoners who are going to target people for hurting children don't really care if they say, I didn't mean to. All they care about is you're in prison, you're charged with the crime against children, right?
Yeah, that's been my experience.
Did you ask Tim why he put the children in the car and drove around with them for 9 days?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He was trying to figure out what to do.
He didn't tell you that he was trying to spend time with them?
He did say that as well, that he was grieving their loss.
You said he knew that he was going to get caught. Right?
Yes.
So if he's got his passport, he's got a check for $3,500, and how many times did he drive past the Atlanta airport?
I don't know. I mean, 2 times the first day, then whenever he went back in that direction.
He didn't do any of that. He didn't fly to...
No, he was still thinking, I think, before he dumped the bodies that he was going to dispose of them before he left for Mexico. And he couldn't find an adequate place to do that.
And all the stuff that he has written down, melt the bodies, burn the bodies, sand the bodies, take them to a dump, take them to a sanitation plant. He never did any of that.
No. And I don't know that that would have been feasible if he tried. I mean, people underestimate the strength of even a corpse. The ligaments, having done gross anatomy in medical school, it's hard to dissect a body.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Dr. Frierson.
Else?
Thank you, Doctor.
Frierson? Thank you. Yes, you are.